You're tuned into Spark, informing minds, inspiring ideas, igniting innovation. Let the conversation sink into your soul.
This is Kelly Marlowe, host of Spark. Today I'm talking with Nicole Anzia, a professional organizer and contributor to the Washington Post, on how to clear and create a stress-free environment for the life you want to live. Thank you for joining me today, Nicole.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Going into the new year is usually a time of clearing and renewal. What prevents people from creating this refresh to a new start?
I think a lot of people are motivated right at the beginning of the year. They've made a resolution. They're sort of overwhelmed by everything that they received over the holidays, and they're motivated to do something, and they make a start, and that's great. But then after a while, their motivation tapers a little bit for a lot of reasons. But for many people, they're just too busy, and it's hard to find the time to declutter your house, and then it's also time-consuming to decide what to do with the things that you want to get rid of, especially things that you don't just want to toss. It's also hard, I just think, because people are constantly making so many decisions in their lives, and this is just, decluttering involves making a lot of decisions about your personal items, and that can be sort of emotionally exhausting. So it's always good to get help, either from a friend or a neighbor or a family member, or maybe somebody in your family, if you think that might work.
So that's a good point about making decisions and having to sort through everything. What I find hard to do is, breaking them down into different piles and then figuring out where they should go or who they should go to. Is there an easier way to do this?
Are you talking, so for instance, if you have gone through your closet and then you have some clothes to get rid of, right, setting those aside as one category, maybe you have some household items that you're ready to get rid of, or some books. So yeah, I think that's right, to divide into categories, and then just try to do one. You don't have to do it all at once, I guess. So maybe make it a goal that, in January you're going to go through your clothes and then you're going to take it somewhere to be donated. And then maybe in February you could think about doing your books, or you can think about doing, your bathroom vanity items another month. I think the thing that people try to do is to try to do too much at once, and it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, and they kind of burn out. So going category by category and starting small and doing one space at a time is really ideal.
That's great advice. What about feeling guilty about everything you've purchased and now you're going to shed them? Is there any way of getting around that guilt or making yourself feel better about it?
I think that the guilt is normal, but you can't dwell on it too long. You bought it, and it's there, and now it's sort of just your responsibility to make a decision and to hopefully do something with it. If you're donating it or recycling it, there are a lot of good places that will happily accept your items and give them to people who can use them, and or like I said, if you dispose of electronics or other things responsibly, I think you can assuage a little bit of your guilt. But I think just letting go of that and realizing that everybody is in the same position, and then maybe resolving to change your behavior a little bit in the new year so you don't feel like you're constantly swimming upstream.
In terms of
I think just bring the things that you're bringing into your home, and then having to sort of figure out what to do with, and eventually maybe decide to get rid of them. So I think just in terms of thinking about when you're making purchases, whether or not you really need the item, whether or not you really want the item, whether or not you could really use the item. And so it just makes life easier on the other end, I guess.
I find that the guilt is also tied to presents, right, from other people. And let's say I'm not using them or I don't need it, but it's a gift.
Right.
How do you usually advise people about those?
Well, I usually tell people that I don't think that the person who gave you the gift would want you to sit there and feel feel badly that you're not using it and you don't want it. I mean, that's not their intention, and I don't think that they would want that from you. So I think it's okay if you just decide that for whatever reason you received a gift from somebody that doesn't meet your needs or that you don't particularly like. Let it go. It's okay. Nobody's going to like you less. Nobody has to know. People do it all the time. And better to have somebody use it, give it to somebody who can use it.
So you mean you don't pull that vase out during Christmas before your in-law comes into town?
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, pull that out, a gift that somebody gave you the year prior. I mean, some of those things maybe it's worth a relationship. I mean, I just find that most people don't remember. I mean, some people probably remember what they gave you, but most times I don't think people are looking through your house to try to see where something is, or trying to count the items they can see on display that they gave you. So, again, you can come up with some creative excuse.
That's a good point. What about, I have family members who like to keep everything and it just piles up. Is there something behind holding on to things or hoarding? I heard it can be disorder. What do you think about that?
So holding on to things that may or may not be useful, I mean, they just can't. Are you referring to just not being able to get rid of anything kind of thing?
I do have a couple of family members who don't seem to want to get rid of anything. You would think there's a war coming. Yeah,
I mean, that is not uncommon, right? I mean, a lot of people who, perhaps grew up in more lean times and who like to, keep things just in case. It's not uncommon, especially with the older generation. I think that oftentimes, if you can just start small and try to sort of reason with them or have somebody else, preferably not somebody in your family. Just talk to them about, a different use for something or, just try to reason about the fact that they may no longer need X, Y, or Z, or maybe try to convince them that maybe keeping half of something. I don't know, is it like office supply? Like people are kind of, I feel like in especially older generations tied to things like office supplies, newspapers. They like to keep a lot of newspapers about big events. Books, I think, are always hard to part with. But I think also an argument can be made perhaps to, not wanting to sort of burden their children and the next generation with having to deal with all of these things when they're gone. And so that's a delicate conversation to have, but it often does speak to people. They don't sort of want to leave a big mess of things that nobody really wants. And so, perhaps coming at it like that is helpful.
You had mentioned before the show that people need permission to get rid of something. Can you explain that, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I do, like you were saying, I think a lot of people feel guilt either about buying something themselves or getting rid of a gift. And, it may be because the item is useful and could be useful, and so they don't really, they want to sort of rationalize, or they feel like they have to rationalize why they should keep it. And so I think just sometimes somebody coming in and just giving them the permission to say, look, it's okay. People, you can get rid of this pair of socks. It's not a big deal. People do this all the time. You shouldn't, again, I think people feel wasteful, and people sometimes feel like they are doing harm to the environment by getting rid of these things. I try to give them permission in both helping them to understand that it's completely okay to donate something that you're no longer using. And then also I help give them permission by trying to get whatever the items are to somebody who can use it, or to the highest sort of use, or to something, to recycle something, or to make sure that we've gotten rid of it in an environmentally responsible way.
Does that help with the holding on to things that the psychology of hoarding, right? That there's stress of getting rid of things that could lead to an actual disorder. Do you come across this when you're working with people, that their living space becomes impaired because it's not being used the way it's intended to?
I do. I mean, I do come across it occasionally. I don't work with hoarders in particular. There are people who specialize in that sort of area of expertise. But I do think that occasionally people start to collect, whatever it may be. It's not as much as I feel like they're buying a ton of stuff and bringing it into the house, but they are sometimes collecting things, anything from newspapers to plastic containers to takeout, plastic utensils and, soy sauce and things like that. But a lot of times what I deal with is just families and people that are so busy and they're working and they're, spending time with their family and they're doing, the things that they like. And all of a sudden they look up one day and they're like, where did this stuff all come from? So it's not really like a conscious decision. It's just that they are accumulating, we all accumulate stuff. And some people just have a harder time than parting with it, right? Because they see a higher value to it. They're worried that they might not be able to find it again. They worry that they might need it. They worry that they might run out of money. And so that's sort of the hoarding side of things, is when there are some irrational reasons that come into play for keeping things.
So you said there were common aspects that you see when people are holding on to things that they have no room for when you walk into a place. And it sounded like, let's say, there are a lot of plastic bags. And what should the space be like versus what is the space typically like for people who are not clearing or doing a refresh?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times I see, tote bags or boxes filled with things and sort of lined around the edges of a room. And I've written a column about how the floor is not an actual storage space. So I think, you want to sort of have things off the floor as much as possible. You don't want to have bags and boxes that haven't been unpacked, suitcases that haven't been unpacked. You want to see some clear surfaces in a kitchen, on a dining room table, on an entryway table, on a desktop. So I guess, people start to feel very overwhelmed in their space by clutter when there's, sort of no empty space and nothing. Their mind is just jumping from space to space to thing because there's just stuff everywhere. So, I think I see a lot of storage on the ground, a lot of, boxes and unreturned purchases, online purchases in hallways and in mudrooms and perhaps out in the garage that people haven't gotten around to getting rid of. Tote bags, bags from having gone shopping and not unpack them. Things like that.
So is it about creating more storage, or they have just used up all their storage and there's nowhere to put everything except on the floors and anywhere they can find?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think a lot of people have not really thought through how to use their storage space for any number of reasons, right? You move in, it's overwhelming, you get busy, you don't really, get fully organized to begin with, and then it's kind of harder to go back to a little bit later. But I think one of the sort of hallmark and most important things in organization is having a place for everything. And if you haven't created a place, for instance, that's easy to put things away and where it's easy to retrieve things, it seems like, it'll just be easier to leave it here. And so, I think that it's really important to sort of identify and create particular spaces and let everybody in your family know that, this is where something belongs, and things need to be put away, and it takes time, and it is, you need to develop routines, and you need to sort of do a little bit every day. Letting things pile up like that really sort of gets people stuck.
Yeah, I can imagine if I couldn't find anything. I wouldn't be able to find anything if I had a lot of stuff to go through every day. So I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that, again, finding a place for everything and having a place for everything, is really important, too, because then you know what you have, so you're not going out to buy more, right? It's like if you know that, your Scotch tape and your staples and your batteries are in a certain place, right, then you know to look there before you go out and buy them. But if you don't have a space and you don't really know where to look, you just go and buy more. And that is sort of one thing that leads to people feeling overwhelmed.
Yes, I have done that. I have done more than once.
Me too, once in a while, but I try not to.
We're going to take a quick break and thank our underwriters. Be back on Clearing Your Space with Nicole Anzia.
Support for KXSF-FM comes from Dress San Francisco, a fashion boutique located in the heart of the city's Marina District. Dress carries a wide range of contemporary clothing and jewelry designs with collections and styles to fit any occasion, from work to weekend and daytime to nighttime. Dress is located at 2271 Chestnut Street between Scott and Pierce. Shop in-store or online at dresssanfrancisco.com. Thank you for your support of San Francisco Community Radio.
This is KXSF 102.5 FM, streaming worldwide at www.kxsf.fm. And you're tuned in to Spark with Kelly Marlowe, informing minds, inspiring ideas, igniting innovation. Let the conversation sink into your soul.
I was talking with Nicole Anzia before the break about how to start the year with clearing and renewal. So I would imagine that clutter causes a lot of anxiety and stress, right? Because I would think that a clear room would be more peaceful.
Yes, absolutely. There are studies in neuroscience that shows that sort of clutter bombards our minds, and it makes it sort of overwhelms our brains, and makes it difficult to concentrate, causes anxiety, causes stress. So a messy space sort of unnecessarily stimulates your brain in a way that isn't a great stimulation. So there's a professor, Inger Burnett Ziegler, from Northwestern University, who said that an environment in a constant a disorganized environment is a constant visual reminder of things left undone, which is where what you're getting at, the stress and anxiety, come in. And it just, clutter sort of can make people feel overwhelmed and like their life is kind of out of control and chaos. So having a neat and organized living environment will not only sort of relieve mental stress and help you feel more productive, but it also is just sort of more soothing for the brain.
It sounds like it has to be a constant priority that you make, right? Because things pile up, then you have to shed, and then they pile up again, then you have to shed, right? Or clear them somehow.
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is like, unfortunately, you're not really ever done organizing. So it's not like if you make an organizing resolution and you do a ton of work in January, then you're just like done, right? Because throughout the day and throughout the year and throughout the months, you're still bringing things in and out of your house. So I really urge people, and I know that this is so tough with everybody's busy lives, but to do, just 10 minutes each day, like put one or two things away in a proper spot. It doesn't have to be like, things don't have to be picture perfect in your home, but mess begets mess, right? So if you're constantly just putting things away and doing a tiny bit every day, you won't get to a point where you feel overwhelmed and then you need to set aside, for instance, an entire Saturday, to do this work. So it is really a continual process and something that's sort of ongoing. And this is not meant to say that you need to spend every free moment, organizing your home. But just that doing things a little bit here and there is really a lot easier than waiting until you've gotten to sort of an overwhelming spot.
So would it be easier to have a good storage or organizational system then? It sounds like you have to have both.
Yeah, I think yes. If you love clothes, you should make sure that your closet is set up to accommodate, your love of clothes. If you love shoes, then you need to think about the best way to store your shoes so that you can enjoy them, right? So it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about doing, fancy sort of built-ins and fancy closets and all of those things, but I think that really thinking through and making space to have the things that you care about organized will allow you to enjoy them more. So it may mean, for instance, if your closet doesn't have space for all the shoes, maybe think about, could you put a shelf, some shelving somewhere in your bedroom? It could even be a bookshelf. I don't know, but thinking about, I guess, giving some thought to how you store things and where you store things is obviously really important. You don't want to, for instance, store your coats. People don't store their coats on the second floor because that's not where they use their coats and need their coats, right? They need them near the front door. So thinking about where you put things, how you store them, how much space you have, and then thinking sort of backward about what you can buy and what you can't buy depending on your space.
So if you don't have the space to accommodate what you have, then you get rid of it? That's the only choice, you think?
Well, I don't think it's the only choice, but I think, you can get creative. Maybe it is that, you have, for instance, a guest room in your home that you never use, right? Nobody's ever in there. And you happen to have clothes everywhere in your closet and in your bedroom that you can't store. Maybe it means putting some hanging racks in the second bedroom and sort of giving up on the dream of having, just a guest bedroom. Maybe it's if you are a huge reader and collect books, it's, buying a couple new or bigger bookshelves. I do think before you go out and buy storage containers or shelves or bins or whatever it is, the first step would be clearly to get rid of get rid of the things that you don't want or need in any category. And then figure out how best to store what you have left.
So I believe there's a rule, right, of how long, if you haven't used something. I don't know if there's actually a rule. I'm just asking. If you haven't used something, and how long should you get rid of it? A year?
I do not hold fast to that, to that sort of rule. I think it's, for instance, do we need to keep every paperback book we have? Of course not. But might there be some hardcover books that you once read and that were your favorites, and of course you're not going to read them again, but you love to have them, you can keep them. Same with clothes. Generally speaking, if you haven't worn it in the past year, you're probably not going to wear it. That being said, if there's a special item or two that you really just want to keep, maybe it's something you wore to a special occasion or you just particularly love, even though it doesn't fit you, by all means, keep it, right? You don't have to get rid of everything that you haven't used in a year. For instance, in a kitchen, you might have some gadget, that you've sort of forgotten about because it's been, in the back of a cabinet for a while, and you discover it again, and, you start to use it. So I just think that assessing your possessions sort of on a regular basis is really important, as opposed to sort of just having a stringent 1-year rule or something like that, because people just have, they assign value to things in different ways, so it's often not that simple, but it's a good sort of thing to think about, I think, that timeline.
Okay, so it sounds like we also keep things because it's sentimental, even though we're not using it or we need it.
Yeah. And I am actually a very sentimental person, so I do keep things also. I think the important thing is number one, if you love an item, it's beautiful, it's your grandmother's china, it's a vase that somebody bought you, it's a piece of artwork, all of those things, like, you should find a way to have them visible and to display them and to use them in your house. It might be a silver platter or something like that. But other things that people keep, right? Old photographs, cards that people gave them, a special journal or things like that, things from the past that you deem sentimental. Those are totally fine to have. I think the important thing is storing them in a way they're not sort of integrated also with your everyday living. So you want to be able to know where they are, and you want to be able to access them. They could be in a guest closet or in a basement closet, in a clear labeled bin, or in an attic, or something like that. So you can find them if you need them, but you don't really need them sort of circulating among the things that you use daily.
Well, we're talking about creative ways that we can reuse what we have. And you had mentioned about using silver instead of using for serving food, to use it for maybe displaying jewelry or storing jewelry. What are some of the other suggestions that you would make in terms of how we can reuse what we have?
Yeah, I have two daughters who are constantly finding things that I sort of am ready to get rid of or donate, and they are so creative in thinking about other ways to use them. Maybe it's, a picture frame, for instance, that you no longer want to display a picture in, but, sometimes you can use that for, creative purposes, use it to create some piece of art or something like that. There are, any number of china bowls and things like that. People can often, people don't use them every day and serve dinners and meals in them, but you could use them, for instance, to have some, to put some change in, or, to put your keys in, or to put your ring and, earrings in at night. I'm trying to think of just smart ways to just think about, to repurposing things. I'm trying to think, ribbons and all, there's just ribbons and stationery, cards, things like that, can always be, I guess not, you could reuse them for an art project or something in your own home, but I often try to think of who else would be able to use them for something interesting, and oftentimes that's a local school or a local sort of art studio, things like that. So I just try to think outside of the box about, even if I can't reuse something, who else might find a purpose for it.
So apparently donation stores can only sell a third of what they receive now, right? So a lot of stuff is now going to landfill. So the question becomes, what can we do differently? Let's say even we're shedding or clearing, besides maybe finding new ways of reusing them. What are the other possibilities that we can shed without guilt?
Yeah, I think that your statistic is entirely true, that especially organizations, national organizations like Goodwill and Salvation Army, do feel overwhelmed by donations and, have way more than they need. So I try to look locally as much as I can, to try to find a home for things. Like I said, local libraries are often a very good resource, for used books, and also for other items. You can ask what they might need. Sometimes they're interested in old photos. Sometimes they're interested in, records. Sometimes they're interested in other things, old DVDs or VHS tapes even. So I try to think like that. And then think locally about a nonprofit or an association who is maybe helping a family transition into a new home, or an organization that might be helping a family after some natural disaster or things like that. So I think that there is a real push toward not just throwing things away, but finding a home for them and finding somebody who can use them. And I think also on the receiving end of that, people are really looking for things that they don't have to buy new. And so you might have vintage stores or local consignment stores that will take things also, a local school, a little community center. So I just think you kind of have to think creatively and ask around and ask people questions and talk to people. And if you have something that you're not sure what to do with, ask, put it on a neighborhood, listserv or on Nextdoor or, some community sharing site just to see if there's a need for it, because often there is.
Time for a quick break, and we'll be right back with Clearing for the New Year.
Support for KXSF comes from Lady Falcon Coffee Club, an iconoclastic, only in San Francisco coffee roastery. Born and blended by the beach in the outer sunset and female-owned and operated, look for Lady Falcon Coffee Club beans at Byright, Williams-Sonoma, Gus's, Rainbow Grocery, Good Eggs, and other fine food vendors, or at their vintage mobile coffee truck about town. Learn more by visiting their website at ladyfalconcoffeeclub.com. Thanks for supporting San Francisco Community Radio.
This is KXSF 102.5 FM, streaming worldwide at www.kxsf.fm. And you're tuned in to Spark with Kelly Marlowe, informing minds, inspiring ideas, igniting innovation. Let the conversation sink into your soul.
Nicole Anzia and I were talking about how we can rid of the guilt while we're shedding and put some reuse to what we currently have. So what about sharing economy? Do you think that there's that maybe there should be a mind shift towards how we own things? Like maybe it's so that we're collecting less, let's say, and we're sharing more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great solution, and I think it's gaining momentum for sure. I know in Washington, D.C., where I live, and in other major cities, the sharing economy is growing, and people are just trying to think more about maybe I don't need to go purchase everything. Maybe I could ask a neighbor if I could borrow, a couple of chairs and a table for a party, or if they have an extra set of plates for this party I'm having, or if, they have 12 extra wine glasses. So just sort of thinking about, I know one community out here who everybody has very small lawns in their neighborhood. So instead of everybody, buying a lawn mower or a leaf blower or a snow blower, they sort of have gone in together, bought one, and then if snow hits, they all can sort of share the snow blower, which happens not very often. Or, during the summer, it takes 5 minutes to cut one of their lawns, and then they can pass it along to the next person. So I think it's both. It's a great concept. It's interesting, both in terms of individuals then not accumulating so much, but it's also a really great way to save some money and to build community and to be in touch with people, and so I think it's gaining in popularity, and people don't think it's like weird anymore to ask somebody to borrow something. It just seems more sort of mainstream and to make more sense.
What about renting clothes? Do you see that taking off instead of having collecting an entire wardrobe?
I see renting clothes like formal wear for sure, and especially in Washington, D.C., right? Oftentimes you're only wearing the garment once or twice, so why invest in, something fancy that you're never going to wear again? For sure, I see that. I see it less, obviously, with other with the regular casual clothing, but I do see a lot of movement toward, again, shopping for used clothing, like in vintage stores or at consignment stores or online consignment sites, not only because, you can find great things, and oftentimes you can find new things, and oftentimes people want to find more unique things. So I see them not necessarily always gravitating toward chain stores into buying new.
So wouldn't some of this collecting be tied to emotional buying or impulsive buying that we should also address?
Yeah, and I mean, that is sort of one thing that I'm seeing more of, and I'm sort of pushing with my clients this year, is sort of the idea of shopping smarter and not buying things because they're on sale, because you might need them, you might want them just in case. And the people, I think, especially in stressful in stressful times, try to find ways to distract themselves. And a lot of times for people that can be shopping and sort of emotional buying. And more, obviously, it's so easy to shop online and to click. And when you click and buy something, this neurotransmitter called dopamine kind of zips to your brain. And sort of the anticipation now that you've bought something and you're waiting for it feels really good. And so next thing you know, when you're feeling bad or when you're, just down or something, you go, oh, I'm going to go and buy something online, or I'm going to just run to the store and see what they have. And so I do think that it's really important to think about why you're buying things and how that makes you feel, and does it really make you happy in the long run, or does it make you feel, does it really impact how you feel and improve your emotional standing?
So it sounds like we got to come up with a new habit. When every time we get down, we need a new high, like maybe cleaning or something. So it sounds like it's about a mindset shift then, that clearing is not something that you just throw things out or shed or get rid of, but just how we approach our lifestyle as a way of keeping a sense of refresh and renewal.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you don't have to be a total minimalist. You can still buy things. But I just think kind of thinking through a little bit of why you're buying things, and then thinking through about how you're bringing it into your house and what that's going to mean, and do you have space for it, and also, how it impacts the environment, and maybe even how the message you're sending to other family members. I mean, habits are very hard to break, as we all know, and I'm certainly not suggesting that people just don't shop. I just think you're buying all this stuff, and it can accumulate more quickly than you realize, and then you feel overwhelmed, and then that's like a whole, it's kind of a cyclical cyclical thing. So I think, as Marie Kondo has said, does it spark joy? And having things in your house that are useful and meaningful and beautiful is definitely far better than having a bunch of stuff that, is sort of nominally important to you. And so I often am, I always think about if you're giving a gift, maybe it's not something that you're going to give to somebody, but rather an experience, or just something that is consumable. Maybe it's a meal out. Maybe you're cooking food for them at their house. Maybe you're buying them a bottle of wine. Maybe you're sending them to the spa for the day. All of those things, are not going to accumulate in your house and can be really meaningful.
So you think we should focus more on the experience, gifting, and mindset, rather than the product or the item, right? But
yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, again, buy the things that you love and use them and enjoy them, but think about sort of the dangers, I guess, of buying to excess. And I feel like in the last decade there was a lot of sort of inexpensive clothes, electronics are becoming less expensive. It's kind of like, why not? It's on sale. It's $5. I can just grab it. There's no, it's no big deal, whatever. But if that mindset can kind of lead to some wasteful purchases and consumption that I don't think is great for people's mental health and also for the environment. And I think people are just trying to sort of rethink and change their mindset a little bit about what they really need and how they can have things they love but not feel overwhelmed.
It's interesting you say that because technology has sped up the production of everything, and it seems like, and they're not long lasting either, right? But
yes.
It's like the cycle of production seems to be going through so fast, where the iPhone doesn't seem to even last more than a few years now for most people.
Right.
So given that, though, what do we do with all these electronics that are going through usage at such a fast speed? With the concerns about mercury being in the landfill, because you can't just toss electronics into the landfill.
Yeah, I recently wrote a column about this in the Washington Post because almost virtually every client I have has a box of old electronics that they're not sure what to do with. And so they just do nothing, and it gets moved from house to house. And as you said, this stuff is moving at the speed of, it is, unbelievable how much things have changed in the last 20 years. And so it is really important, and I really urge people not to throw things in the landfill. There are stores like Best Buy and other electronic stores which will take old electronics and recycle them. They'll take everything from cords to headphones to laptops and phones and batteries and things like that. So that's a really good option, and I urge people to use those. There's also, there are more and more companies that are specializing in this, and some of them will even pick up from your home, and they will wipe clean computers and phones and destroy them and then recycle them for you, because often the memory on the devices is what causes people to sort of get paralyzed about what to do with them. Apple has a give back program where you can take in old devices and they'll give you an in-store credit, and or if they can't accept it for some reason, they will take care of disposing of it. Office Depot and Staples will take printer cartridges and give you credit for those. And also, I try to urge people, again, like we were talking about earlier, to think about, if you no longer want this laptop because it's outdated, but it still works fine, right? Do some research in your community and see if it can be repurposed for somebody else who may be able to use it for, sort of very basic uses. Also with phones, there are often places that, on the internet you can learn fairly easily how to get your data off of your phone, or go to the store that you purchased it. But also those can be given to people for domestic violence purpose. There's a bunch of different organizations, veterans, and ways that those can be recycled and reused as well. The key is to really keep up with them because they accumulate quickly. Things either break or they become sort of less useful to you for any reason. And I always urge people that when you buy something new, to try to figure out how to get rid of your previous device soon after that. Otherwise, the chances of you doing it are slim, and then they'll pile up in that box.
What are other ways of being environmentally conscious when you're clearing and you're boxing things up? Are there other organizations or places that everyone should be thinking about?
In terms of, if your, clothes is some retailers will take your unused clothing back and give you a credit. I know the company Marine Layer, you can send in an old T-shirt, they'll give you a $5 credit. H&M, you can take clothes back and they'll recycle them. Patagonia, of course, always will repair any old jackets or ski pants or tents or camping equipment, for free, and or they will accept donations to be recycled into new products. I think J. Crew allows you to now recycle your jeans with them. So I just urge people to really do some research. And like I said, there are online consignment stores that are really, really user-friendly, or you can send clothes to be resold if it's in good condition. I think about things like towels and, hand towels and bath towels and beach towels that people don't want anymore can often go to animal shelters. They will use those. So it's just kind of thinking out of the box and doing a little tiny bit of work, and you can usually find a way to either recycle or get something to somebody who can use it.
Do you think it makes a difference to buy sustainable products?
I do. I mean, overall, right, I think we should lower our consumption. There are some statistics that I think McKinsey study showed that since in 2014, people bought 60% more clothing than they did just 14 years earlier, and they kept their purchases, half as long. And the average American throws out about 80 pounds of clothing a year, which is sort of a staggering number. So I think overall, a decline in our consumption is most helpful. But then, there are things that you need, and if you can find a sustainable or organic clothing line that you like and that you could buy a few things from, there are organic sheets. There are sheets that are, bed sheets that are made with more sustainable materials. Things like that I think are really important. I mean, every little bit helps. And so, I urge people to sort of seek out and do research and see if there are items that are not as bad for the environment.
So the bottom line is really to focus on a mind shift of how we purchase, right, in terms of this entire clearing process, coming into New Year and being able to sustain that.
Mm-hmm.
Buy what we need, it sounds like. So that means we can't be going to Costco.
You can go to Costco if you're going to use the stuff and it's not going to, go bad and, you have room for it. That's okay.
You said that you have this challenge of not buying anything for a month or more that you have presented. How does that work? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's one thing to just say like, oh, try to buy less, right? It's a much easier sort of prospect to think about a given amount of time. And, we've just had the holidays. We've all accumulated probably more than we needed through gifts and through our own purchases and things like that. So maybe just try and just as an experiment. Think about for 1 month, trying not to buy anything aside from the obvious food and things like that. If you're dying to buy a book, maybe you could check it out from the library. Maybe you could borrow it from a friend. If, you're feeling like you need something to wear that you don't have, maybe you could, again, look at either buying something think about buying something secondhand, not that month, but borrowing something from somebody and or just making whatever, you have in your closet work, which oftentimes it will. Maybe it's, just sort of, I think it's an interesting challenge for people because it's just so easy to click a button and buy stuff, to just, give it a try and see how you feel and see if simplifying sort of the items that are coming into your house makes you feel more in control and makes you feel better and actually frees up some time for you.
Okay, if we were to end with the 5 strategies for staying organized and clutter-free, and then to sustain it throughout the year, what would they be?
Okay, can I do 6?
Sure.
Okay, so I would say keep it simple. Like, don't try to create these elaborate systems for things. Your paper files can just be, they don't need to be, every specific category. It can be, home purchases. It can be business expenses. It could be, utility bills. Like, don't try to make this too difficult, right? Just aim to get things organized so that you can find what you need, know what you have, and, put things away more easily. I would say develop some routines so that, it sort of becomes maybe habitual to open your mail when you walk in the door at night, or to look at your mail first thing in the morning, or to do your laundry every Saturday morning and put it away on Sunday, whatever that may be. Maybe you start the dishwasher every night and you empty it in the morning. So just develop some very basic routines. As I said earlier, just create a place for everything and put everything in its place. And again, this does not have to be this elaborate, system of drawers and bins and dividers and all of these things. But if you know that your office supplies are here, make sure that you're always putting them there. Make sure everybody knows they're there. Make sure they get put away. I always recommend people should keep a current and detailed to-do list. So just writing tasks down and things that you need to get done and being able to check them off really keeps people motivated and makes people, writing a to-do list, I think especially every night, it's shown that people sleep better and, feel more calm going to sleep just for the next day. And again, this does not have to be anything elaborate. Just jot down a few things you need to do the next day and keep a running list. And then toss things regularly. So again, like I was saying, don't let your mail pile up for 2 weeks and then decide to go through it all. It would just be so much easier to open it every day. It takes 5 minutes. If you feel like you're overwhelmed with clothes, keep a bag in your closet. And, if there's something that, you kind of zip by every day and you're never going to wear it, put it in the bag. When the bag is full, take it to somewhere to donate. So just do a little bit of purging here and there. Empty out a junk drawer one day, maybe if you have 30 minutes, or, go through your pantry, things like that. And then last, I think in this Instagram age, and there's so many home improvement TV shows and podcasts and all of those things that people are sort of, you can set an unrealistic goal for yourself. Your books do not need to be color coordinated. Your socks don't need to be perfectly arranged in your drawer, or your T-shirts perfectly folded. If it's neat enough and you know where things are and your books are arranged, by author or by type of book or whatever, that's fine. Your standard and whatever you do is good. You don't need to attain some Instagrammable type storage system for your home. I would just say, a constant sort of culling and keeping things under control and knowing where things are is victory.
Thank you so much for summarizing the strategies for this year. And thank you for joining me on Spark today.